In this episode, we begin with a part of cybersecurity that surprises many beginners because it reminds us that security does not stop at the screen, the server, or the network diagram. A great deal of modern protection depends on human behavior, building access, trust, and the ordinary routines people follow without thinking very hard about them. That is why physical penetration testing matters, and why it often includes methods like phishing, tailgating, and impersonation. These methods are used to test whether an organization's people and physical controls can recognize suspicious behavior before a real intruder reaches systems, devices, paperwork, or restricted spaces. The goal is not to create fear or to make employees feel foolish. The goal is to understand how an attacker might combine social pressure, timing, and access opportunities to move through the physical environment in ways that digital defenses alone would never stop. Once you understand that, physical security starts to feel much more connected to the larger cybersecurity story. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at cyber.Author.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Physical penetration testing is a controlled effort to evaluate how well an organization protects its real-world spaces, people, equipment, and access pathways against unauthorized entry or misuse. It is called a test because it is authorized, planned, and conducted for learning rather than for harm. Even so, the activities used during the test may look a lot like the methods a real attacker would use, because the purpose is to reveal whether the organization would notice, resist, or respond appropriately under realistic conditions. A beginner should think of it as a rehearsal that exposes weak points in doors, visitor handling, access habits, employee judgment, and trust decisions. The test may explore whether someone can enter a building, reach a restricted office, plug into an unattended device, retrieve exposed information, or persuade staff to help in ways they should not. This matters because real attackers often combine physical opportunity with social manipulation, and once they enter the wrong space, many purely technical protections become easier to bypass, misuse, or undermine. One of the most important beginner lessons is that physical penetration testing is not only about locks and doors. It is also about behavior, assumptions, and everyday convenience. Many organizations have policies for visitor check-in, badge use, equipment security, clean desks, and restricted areas, but policies only matter if people actually follow them when the situation feels normal and familiar. A secure door means less if people routinely hold it open for strangers. A badge system means less if employees feel too awkward to challenge someone without visible identification. An access rule means less if a convincing visitor can talk their way around it by sounding rushed, polite, or important. Physical testing reveals that security often fails through habits rather than through force. That is why phishing, tailgating, and impersonation belong in this topic. They are not just clever tricks. They are ways of testing whether the organization's culture, awareness, and physical processes are strong enough to resist someone who looks ordinary while trying to do something unauthorized. Phishing may sound purely digital at first, but it often plays a major role in physical penetration testing because digital contact can prepare the ground for physical access. A tester might send a message that encourages someone to expect a visitor, click a scheduling link, share a detail about office routines, or reveal information that makes a later in-person approach more believable. In that sense, phishing becomes part of a larger access story rather than a separate event. A beginner should understand phishing here as a trust-building tool. It can gather information, create false expectations, or lower suspicion before the tester ever walks through a door. For example, if staff receive a believable message about maintenance, deliveries, or a support visit, they may become more willing to accept an unfamiliar person moving through the workspace later that day. The point is not that every email leads directly to building access. The point is that physical compromise often begins by preparing people psychologically before any physical move takes place. This connection matters because many real attacks do not stay confined to one channel. An attacker might begin with messages or calls, learn names and routines, then use that knowledge to appear more credible in person. That is why physical penetration testing often looks at how information shared through digital channels can weaken physical defenses without anyone realizing the connection. A seemingly harmless reply about office hours, badge issues, or who handles deliveries can become useful context for someone trying to enter a restricted area later. Beginners sometimes imagine physical and cyber threats as separate worlds, but they overlap constantly. A message that gets someone to prop open a door, expect a visitor, or reveal where a team sits inside the office can become a bridge between online deception and real-world entry. Recognizing that bridge is part of recognizing the test itself. The organization is not just being tested on whether employees avoid suspicious links. It is being tested on whether employees understand that small pieces of information and routine trust can support a much larger access attempt. Tailgating is one of the clearest physical access methods to understand because it depends on a very ordinary social instinct. Tailgating happens when an unauthorized person follows an authorized person into a restricted space without properly checking in or using approved access. In everyday life, holding a door for someone seems polite and harmless, which is exactly why the method can work so well. A beginner should see tailgating as a test of whether courtesy overrides security. The tester may carry a box, wear a hurried expression, or position themselves at the right moment so that an employee feels social pressure to be helpful rather than cautious. No force is needed. No lock is broken. The weakness appears in the decision to treat physical access as a matter of convenience instead of authorization. Physical penetration testing uses tailgating because it reveals whether access controls are truly enforced by human behavior or whether the organization relies too heavily on the hope that people will somehow know when politeness should stop and verification should begin. Tailgating also reveals something deeper about organizational culture. In many workplaces, people do not want to seem rude, suspicious, or difficult, especially when the person behind them looks confident or belongs in a professional setting. That hesitation is understandable, but it creates risk because attackers depend on exactly that discomfort. A tester using tailgating is often trying to answer a practical question. Will anyone pause and ask whether this person has a badge, visitor escort, or valid reason to enter this area? If the answer is no, then the problem is not only the door. The problem is that social pressure is stronger than access discipline. For beginners, this is a valuable lesson because it shows that physical security depends on everyday decisions that feel small at the time. Holding one door, assuming one person is supposed to be there, or ignoring one missing badge can become the moment that allows someone to reach workstations, meeting rooms, printers, confidential papers, or network equipment that should never have been accessible without deliberate approval. Impersonation is another powerful method in physical penetration testing because it takes advantage of how quickly people assign trust based on appearance, role, and confidence. Impersonation means presenting oneself as someone who belongs in order to gain access, cooperation, or information that should not be given freely. That might involve pretending to be a delivery worker, a technician, a temporary employee, a vendor representative, a contractor, or even an internal staff member from another department. A beginner should not think of impersonation only as wearing a costume or using fake credentials in an obvious way. Often it is more subtle than that. It may depend on tone of voice, believable details, common workplace language, and the willingness of others to accept a plausible explanation without asking follow-up questions. Physical penetration testing uses impersonation because real intruders often succeed not by overpowering controls, but by fitting just well enough into the environment that others stop questioning their presence before they have earned that trust. What makes impersonation especially dangerous is that it often blends with the routines of busy workplaces. Offices regularly receive visitors, service providers, interview candidates, delivery personnel, and unfamiliar faces, so employees become used to seeing people they do not personally know. That normal variety creates opportunity for a tester who seems calm, prepared, and in a hurry for a believable reason. They may ask for help reaching a room, mention a fake work order, refer to a common office issue, or act as though someone else already approved their presence. This works because people often respond to confidence and familiarity cues faster than they respond to security procedures. For a beginner, the lesson is that recognition is not just about spotting obviously suspicious behavior. It is also about noticing when a person is asking for access, movement, or information without going through the expected process. Impersonation succeeds when the appearance of legitimacy replaces actual verification, and physical penetration testing is designed to discover whether the organization makes that mistake under ordinary conditions. These methods often work best when they are combined rather than used alone. A tester may begin with phishing to learn names, schedules, vendor processes, or building routines. That information then helps them impersonate someone more convincingly once they arrive in person. After that, tailgating may help them bypass the final barrier into a restricted area if employees have already accepted the general story. This layering matters because real attackers think in chains rather than isolated tricks. They look for one small success to support the next one. A beginner should therefore understand physical penetration testing as a sequence of trust tests. Can the tester gather information, create expectations, appear credible, and use timing or courtesy to move deeper into the environment? Each step may look minor on its own, but together they can produce access that should have been impossible. Recognizing the test means noticing not just one suspicious moment, but the way small acts of trust and missed verification can connect into a broader path towards sensitive spaces, devices, and information. Simple examples help make this more concrete. Imagine an employee receives a message that building maintenance will inspect conference room equipment during the week. 2 days later, a person arrives carrying cables and a clipboard, mentions the notice, and asks someone to let them through a badge-controlled door because their escort has not arrived yet. Once inside, the person moves toward a restricted area, stopping briefly at an unattended printer where documents are waiting in plain view. In another case, a visitor stands near a secured entrance with coffee in hand and follows a group through the door while thanking them casually, then walks confidently toward an office cluster where laptops are left unlocked during a meeting. None of these moments require loud alarms or dramatic confrontation to be risky. They require only enough misplaced trust to let unauthorized movement continue. Physical penetration testing uses scenarios like these because they reveal whether employees recognize that a believable story and ordinary behavior can still hide an access attempt. Recognizing a physical penetration test therefore begins with recognizing what normal control should look like. Visitors should follow visitor processes. Employees should display or carry approved identification where required. Restricted doors should require proper access rather than social convenience. Sensitive spaces should not be entered based on confidence alone. Requests for help, escort, or exceptions should be handled through known procedures rather than through pressure, politeness, or rushed explanations. For a beginner, that means recognition is often less about identifying the tester specifically and more about identifying the behavior that breaks expected process. Is someone asking to bypass the normal path? Is someone moving without clear authorization? Is someone using a story to replace verification? Those are the warning signs that matter. When people focus only on whether a person looks suspicious, they often miss the real issue. Many successful testers and attackers do not look alarming. They look plausible. That is why the process matters more than the appearance. A common misconception is that challenging someone or verifying access is unfriendly, overly suspicious, or the responsibility of security staff alone. In reality, organizations are strongest when everyday employees understand that polite verification is part of professional responsibility. Another misconception is that physical penetration testing is mainly about catching careless individuals and embarrassing them. Good testing is supposed to improve the system, not shame people. If many employees fail the same kind of test, that usually points to training gaps, unclear processes, weak visitor controls, poor badge culture, or leadership habits that unintentionally reward convenience over security. A third misconception is that physical compromise only matters if someone steals a device or a document immediately. In truth, a few minutes of unauthorized access can be enough to photograph information, connect unauthorized hardware, observe office layouts, collect credentials left in view, or prepare for a later attack. Physical penetration testing helps organizations understand those risks before a real intruder exploits them with harmful intent. This is why the best organizational response to these tests is not paranoia, but practiced awareness. Employees should know how to pause, verify, redirect, and report without escalating every interaction into conflict. They should understand that helpfulness and professionalism are still possible while maintaining boundaries around access and identity. They should know that a missing badge, a rushed excuse, an unexpected visitor, or a request to ignore procedure deserves calm verification rather than automatic acceptance. Over time, that creates a healthier security culture because the organization stops relying on luck and starts relying on shared habits. For beginners, the deeper lesson is that physical security and cybersecurity support one another. If attackers can enter the space, observe routines, access devices, or influence staff in person, then many digital protections become easier to work around. Recognizing physical penetration testing means seeing how phishing, tailgating, and impersonation fit together as real-world trust attacks against the organization's people, spaces, and processes. As we close, the main idea to remember is that physical penetration testing helps organizations see whether their physical security truly holds when someone tries to exploit ordinary human behavior. Phishing can prepare people and gather details that support later access. Tailgating tests whether courtesy will override access control. Impersonation tests whether appearance and confidence will be accepted in place of actual verification. These methods matter because real attackers often rely on trust, timing, and routine more than on force. For a brand new learner, this topic is important because it expands the meaning of cybersecurity beyond screens and software. It shows that security depends on how people handle doors, visitors, information, and assumptions in the physical world as well. When organizations learn to recognize and resist these methods, they become much harder to manipulate, and the path from social pressure to real access becomes far more difficult for a tester or an attacker to complete.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.